difficulties worked out now, so we'll call the meeting to order. May we have roll call, please?
Ms. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Wright is absent. Mr. Gillis?
Present.
Mr. Sheridan is absent. Ms. Hughes? Here. Mr. Pollack?
Here.
Mr. Lopez?
Here.
Okay, thank you. If everyone could check your cell phones and make sure they're turned off, please. Our first item of business is approval of the minutes from the February 26, 2013 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Lopez, Ms. Hughes, thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public comment. This is the time when anyone wishing to speak to the board on any item not on our agenda tonight can come and talk to us at this time. If you're here on a specific item, then you would speak later in the meeting. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. We have no public meeting items. First public hearing is ordinance number 1564, comp plan amendment. May we hear from the applicant?
Drew Abel, 558 West New England Avenue, Winter Park, Florida. The applicant, Standard Pacific Homes. A lot of thought went into this plan ever since last fall, and we support the staff recommendation. Available for any questions.
Can you tell us about your project so we know what we're considering from you?
Yes, ma'am. We have assembled 4 different landowners trying to create a residential subdivision off of 426 near Lake Charm. It's going to consist of 83 lots, 70-foot widths.
70-foot width?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We'd start down a path of doing a PD to kind of lock down the setbacks and the development requirements, and then somewhere around the holidays decided that R1B would probably be the right zoning. So we did a triple application of annex into the portion of the property into the city, rezone, and future land use change.
Is that it?
We have a preliminary site plan submitted. We're going to go an average of, I think, a minimum of 142-foot depth. In short, we wanted a 3-car garage with the ability for the pool to do high-end homes in this submarket.
Are there any questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
May we hear from staff?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairperson. This is a request to amend the city's official future land use map to change the future land use designation of approximately 20...
I'm sorry, we can't all hear you.
This is a request to amend the city's official future land use map to change the future land use designation of approximately 26.12 acres from Seminole County Low Density Residential, LDR, to City Low Density Residential. The property consists of approximately 26.12 acres and is located on the west and east side of Lee Avenue, approximately 100 feet north of the intersection of Lee Avenue and Allendale Avenue. The applicants are Maitland Fruit Company, Inc., Evans Groves, Inc., Pamela Martin and William West, and EP and Miriam Bruce. The applicant's consultant is Mr. David Schmidt with David Schmidt Engineering. On December 3rd, 2012, City Council adopted ordinance number 1554, annexing part of this subject comp plan amendment land, which is 18.91 acres. And on March 18, 2013, City Council adopted ordinance number 1562, annexing the remainder 7.21 acres of the subject property. The applicant is requesting a future land use map amendment from Seminole County Low Density Residential to City of Oviedo Low Density Residential, future land use. So the requested change is a change in jurisdictions. It functions as a change of the jurisdiction. The subject property will be combined with other parcels to the west of Lee Avenue, already designated with the city's low-density residential future land use designation, to create an 83-lot single-family residential subdivision. The City Council will conduct a transmittal public hearing on the subject of future land use map amendment on Monday, May 6th, 2013. You have in your packet the supporting data and analysis with all the data that was gathered by staff and analyzed by staff and the consultants, with maps showing the existing future land use, the proposed future land use, as well as the proposed zoning and existing zoning. So it is recommended that the PZA recommend adoption of ordinance number 1564. This concludes my presentation, and I am available for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Okay, we'll open it up for public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak at this time? I have one. Ken Flory? Okay. Would you state your name and address for the record, please?
I'm Ken Flory, 1229 Allendale Drive. I'm not sure all what can be addressed tonight. I'm not going to go into real depth, but one is what happens, well, let me go back. What did you say happens on May 6th?
Sir, you need to speak.
Sorry. Well, sorry. One of the things she asked for was, or she mentioned, was something was going, a meeting was going to happen on May 6th, and I couldn't hear.
The City Council will consider this ordinance at that time.
Oh, that's all, just the annexation, or I mean, the changing of the zoning, right? That's all you're doing tonight.
And the zoning.
That's all we're doing tonight, okay? So what happens next after council accepts the change in the zone? How fast does the process happen before they start the development?
Unfortunately, this isn't a time for you to ask us questions. It's a time
You just
for
told me to ask you questions. Did you not? Sorry, but
I'm sorry, I said you need to address the board, not the staff.
I'm asking you.
And I'm telling you that this is not the time for you to stand and ask us questions. It's for you to give us your opinion and comments about it. If you have questions about the project, then you need to talk to staff.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public hearing. What's the board's pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I recommend approval of ordinance number 1564.
Okay. Do we have a second? Seeing none, the motion fails. Do we have another motion? Do you have a question? Okay, we need a motion on the floor first, and then we can go into discussion.
I say I recommend approval of ordinance 1564.
Okay. So you've remade your motion, and now there's a second. Okay, is there discussion? Mr. Lopez, did you have?
Yeah, I second it. My
Did you have-
question, I have a question for the developer.
Sir, can you come back up, please?
You said you were going to build some, was it two-story houses, did you say?
A mix of one-story and two-story, right?
What's the square footage on the homes?
I should have brought my CMA with me. I think it's 28 to 42, 2,800 to 4,200 square feet, in that range. It's going to be determined mostly by setbacks and market conditions. Most buyers don't want to go all the way out to the setback. But we're benchmarking off of Oviedo Forest and Terra Lago, the two active subdivisions in that area. Terra Lago is going up to 5,100 square feet.
Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I can't think of it.
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
What price range are you talking about for these homes?
Really, whatever the market will bear at the time. It's already elevated from the time we underwrote the deal. We had investment committee a couple months ago. It's really just as much as we can bear per square foot.
can you give me like a,
No, ma'am.
what you expect a minimum would be?
No, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But, we're paying a good amount for the property per acre, and we've got to justify that by coming to market and being above market. Standard Pacific is a pretty well-regarded company out of California, on par with something like a Toll Brothers or David Weekley. Our presence here is not that big now, but it will be here in the next couple of quarters.
Okay, we'll talk about zoning in a minute. Okay, are there any other questions or discussion on the,
When do you plan on breaking it?
Well, and this ties into the comment we had earlier. Just the timeline is just, our conditions to closing the property are when we have approvals to develop.
6 months, 12 months?
We don't control the process. I'd like to go sooner rather than later. It's, the market's kind of uplifting right now, so I think we go to DCA in the summer, come out and do final engineering roughly in the fall. I'd like to be breaking ground by the end of the year if I had, if it was my choice, but we've got to just go through these wickets.
are there any other questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, the motion before us is to approve ordinance number 1564. See no other discussion, we'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. I'm sorry.
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the zoning map amendment for ordinance 1564. Does the applicant want to come back and add anything regarding the zoning? Do we hear from staff?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. This is a request to amend the city's official zoning map to change the zoning district of approximately 35.14 acres from Seminole County Agriculture and City Residential R1A to City Residential R1B. If you look at the map in your, the data and analysis, you can see the existing zoning map at the end of the report, and then the proposed zoning map with all the adjacent zonings too. Just to remind you that this change of zoning actually includes some area that were already in the city. So the change of future land use was for...
I'm sorry, it's hard to hear you because it sounds like your microphone's turning off.
I don't know what's happening here. Okay, the change of, the future land use change is on property which is on the right and the west side of Lee Road, and 3 of the ones that are on the west side are just the ones that are separated by the line. These were all the properties that were annexed into the city. The zoning map amendment it encompasses more land, so it encompasses all the land that was changed or that's proposed to change, the future land use change, plus part of some parcels on the west side of Lee Avenue, as you can see here. So the area that is being changed is bigger. The zoning map amendment involves 35.14 acres. The comp plan amendment involves 26.14 acres. Okay? Staff researched the request change of zoning district for consistency with the comprehensive plan and the land development code, compiled all the findings and summarized them in the attached report. The subject request is compatible with comp plan policies 1112, 1114, 1155, 3139, 31313, and 31314. These policies, the language of the policies, they are included in the report on the back of the staff report. Summarizing these policies, they support more compact walkable areas, the promotion of a diversified citywide housing stock, the availability of a diversified citywide residential lot mix, and the availability of a variety of housing types appropriate for residents at all stages of life. The proposed I-1B zoning district, with its 6,000 square foot minimum lot size, is consistent with the variety of lot size that surround the subject property, still maintaining the low density characteristic of its land use designation. The lots within the Allendale Plat, Block C, single-family residential development on the south side of the subject property are 50 feet by 130 feet. On average, they are 6,500 square feet in size. And they are within a medium-density residential future land use designation. The lots within the Cedar Bend subdivision, which are on the west side of the proposed, of the subject property, are a little bit bigger. They are 90 feet by 121 feet. They have, in average, 10,890 square feet in size. The lots on the west side have various shapes and sizes, and the lots on the north side are bigger tracts of agricultural land with a low-density residential future land use designation. At its Thursday, March 21st, 2013 public meeting, the Development Review Committee recommended approval of the proposed zoning map amendment to City R1B residential. The City Council will conduct a first hearing on the subject zoning map amendment on Monday, May 6, 2013. It is recommended that the PZA recommend adoption of ordinance number 1565. This concludes my presentation, and we are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff? Ms. Hughes?
In the drawing, in the existing zoning map, in comparing to the proposed moving to the R1B, the three properties on the left, on the three on the west, that are going to be changing from the R1A to the R1B,
Yeah, they are proposing to change from R1A to R1B.
those three properties are properties for
They are,
individuals
actually, they are owners of the subject property.
that are
Yeah,
that are involved here.
they are
And there-
involved in the development.
And there's still going to be an agricultural one just south of that southern homeowner.
South, no, on the south of those R1Bs they're going to remain R1A, city.
Okay, and but there is one.
Agriculture is on the north.
Okay, so the A1 that I see on my drawing.
Oh, here. Yeah, there is, you're right, there is one agricultural one on the south of one of the lots.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is that all? Thank you. Is that A1 on the south of the property we're talking about, was that an enclave that was created by the annexation? Is that still in the county, or is that in the city?
It's still in the county, but it's not an enclave. You can see that there is also property more to the south, which is still A1,
Okay,
close to the R2 zoning, if you can see on the map.
okay. Are there any other questions of staff? Okay, seeing none, we'll open it up for public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the board on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public hearing. What's the board's pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mr.
I'd like to
Gillis?
recommend approval of ordinance number 1565.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hughes, thank you. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
is an R1B designation, those lot sizes seem, quite small. The developer came up and said they were looking at 70-foot lot sizes, and R1B is at a 60-foot minimum lot width. I think that's, pretty, those houses, especially at the square footage they were talking about, are going to be packed in there pretty tight.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
that was something that staff considered. It was also something that the DRC, they deliberated for a long time at their meeting. But that was one of their issues, was the lot size and whether or not it was compatible to the surrounding area. And if you look at Allendale, the homes that are directly south of this property, the lot width in that subdivision is 50 feet. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
What's the size of the houses now?
The homes are older homes. I'm not quite sure the square footage of the homes that are there, but it's an older established subdivision.
Yeah, it just, I mean, you know, I'm not sure exactly what the, you know, those are, but I'm just looking at the lot dimensions under R1B and the size of the houses and, you know, and how much land is actually going to be around after the footprint of the house is there. There's not going to be much land at all.
They would have to meet the city's setback requirements.
Right.
The size of the home is not something that our land development code governs, so we don't look at the size of the home when we're looking at the change of zoning. What we're looking at is whether or not it's compatible, the lot sizes are compatible with the surrounding, whether or not the zoning is compatible, and whether or not the zoning is consistent with the future land use designation that it is going to. And so we have determined, staff has determined that the zoning is consistent with the future land use. It is compatible to the subdivisions to the south especially. It's actually, the lot sizes, the lot widths are actually larger than the lot widths that are to the south of this.
Sir, I'm sorry, but this is not, I'm sorry, sir.
That's why our lot size is 75 wide, 140. So that has to be brought up because that's an important part. Sorry.
We also looked at the future land use of the properties to the south. The future land use of that area is medium-density residential. They could actually go to smaller lot sizes in that subdivision to the south. We looked at the subdivision to the east of it, and those lot sizes are comparable to what the developer is actually going to build. So we looked at all of that to determine whether or not, we also looked at the policies in the comprehensive plan, and there are policies that support compact development, which we would consider this project to be compact development. So we determined that it is consistent and compatible to the surrounding area and consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I've got a question then. If these are all zoned R1A, and according to Table 3 on page 7, R1A, the minimum lot width is 85 feet. Were they grandfathered in?
I mean,
am I looking at this incorrectly?
That's the same question
this
I have,
map
Mr.
here?
Pollack.
That project would be grandfathered in. If the lot sizes are, from what we have determined, 50 feet wide, it would be grandfathered in. And that project was annexed into the city, I'm not quite sure when, but it was annexed years ago. And there's one lot that was not annexed into the city, which is in the middle of that. It's the third house in. It was not annexed, but it's not considered an enclave because there's a swath, a 20-foot,
yeah, 20
swath
foot.
of land that's going to be between this subdivision, Allendale, and the proposed subdivision, which will connect it to Lee Avenue, which is a county road. So because it's still the county road, it's not considered an enclave. But from what we have determined, the lot width in the area just south of this project is 50 feet wide, and it would be grandfathered in.
I mean, you know, they're all, they may, the lot widths may be different, but they were all zoned 1A, and now we're putting in a zoning for R1B, which, you know, it seems inconsistent with the existing zoning.
If I may respond?
Go ahead.
The initial request of the applicant was to go to PUD, because what they wanted to do was to have some lots that were 70 feet in width. But we don't have the 70-foot lots that we have in our zoning code. They are within the medium density residential. So I just want to remind the board that the low density residential is maintained. So the number of houses is still low. The other issue is that just for you to have a comparison of the size of the sizes of the lots, if you look at Kingsbridge East is a good example for you. It's a subdivision, it's a PUD that has lots, the majority of them in the street that leads to the lots that are on the lake. Those lots are 50 foot wide. They are less than what it is this one here. And they are adjacent to houses and to lots that are a little bit bigger. And those lots are not even 80 foot wide. Another example of a PUD that has a variety of lot sizes, and that's why it is a PUD, because the developer wanted to offer different types of lots, is the Sanctuary. The Sanctuary has many of the lots, they vary from 50 through 80. So these are just an example of a bigger area where you have a mix of lots. In this case here, it's a smaller development. The developer, we are reviewing the preliminary subdivision plan with the less lots, 83 lots, which he's proposing to go over the 60-foot wide lots. But of course, that the zoning guarantees that you can have smaller lots. And this is in tandem with the city and the policies that I mentioned here. And if you can look at the policies in our report, that it's to provide a little bit more of a variety of size of lots. And that would be the case in this particular place. So we thought this staff analyzed it, and because there are lots to the south that are smaller, and also if you look at the lots on the east, they are bigger, but they are very shallow. So these lots, the geometry of the lot is what makes it more feasible for more amenities sometimes than just being big. You know, if you have a narrow lot but it's long enough, then you can put a pool, you can put even what now we allow an accessory, the mother-in-law dwelling. So it's a matter of the type of design that you use, that you can improve all these or, you know, offer more amenities even in narrower lots.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Gillis?
I have a question for staff. You all still have a pervious-impervious surface ratio that is applied to every lot, so no matter what size the house.
Yeah, you have to have an open space in every lot of 25%.
Yes, 25%, correct. Okay. So
And
no matter what
again,
size lot
the density is maintained. So if you look, we already went from low-density residential in the county, which is 4 dwelling units per acre, to 3.5, which is the city. Now, even if you have the option of having narrower lots, you cannot build more than the maximum density, which in this case is 91 lots. So it's the geometry and the density that play this type of, that give us more options. And another thing that I'd like to point out, and probably you see that in the next presentation, is when you have smaller lots, this gives you more options in terms of the type of development that you can put. You can make cluster housing, you can make pocket neighborhoods, which are a little bit more different than what we have here. And it's not the case that it's being proposed. The PSP, you see the PSP when it comes for analysis, but this gives also more options in terms of the way that you can use the land and even preserve more some open land and open space. So the city is going this direction in terms of policies. So we evaluated that it is compatible what is the development and the future of the development in the city, and still with this neighborhood.
Ms. Hughes?
I was just going to respond to Mr. Pollack's question. I think what you're trying to get to is that both of these neighborhoods have less than 2,000 square foot for their homes. Many of them about 1,600 square feet to
Okay.
1,900 net.
That's what, yeah, I mean,
Mr. Lopez?
I have a question for you. Thank you for coming back up. I see that you noticed that we have an issue up here.
Yes.
Okay. As you can see, we're trying to accommodate everybody's needs here.
Sure.
Are you willing to build smaller houses and adhere to the land use requirements, regardless of what staff is saying? Because most of us live in the city.
Right.
So we want to make everybody happy here.
And to Genevieve's point, you want huge lots with small homes, and it's just not.
We have to compromise.
Well, we felt like going from a minimum 60 by 6,000 square foot to almost 10,000 square foot lots was a.
It's not going to happen.
Okay.
We need to compromise.
We spent, independent of this room tonight, I felt like we spent 9 months trying to be as thoughtful as we could about the way to go. We had 50 foots here, 90 foots here. We're doing 70s, very deep. I think it's a mistake to do a 120-foot lot. The consumer always wants a room for a pool.
Then my suggestion, we do a little bit of combination of a smaller house. You need to come up with some number that's workable for you as well.
Well, your jurisdiction, the setbacks will be pretty restrictive, as well as, like Mr. Gillis pointed out, the impervious requirements are going to limit us. There's a governor on this thing of about 91 lots anyway. So to do 83 with a good recreational and storm ponds and open areas.
Some suggestions.
honestly, R1A is out of the question for this. Is that correct?
Well, your land development code asks for a diversity of zoning and a approved lot supply, and right now you have neither. If you just do a big swath of R1A, you would literally be violating your own LDR. And that's kind of the definition of sprawl, when you just have all the same thing, where, like, if you just we could just do a grid under R1A zoning and have no open space, no fun, just do the bare minimum threshold. It would maximize the land equity, but it wouldn't be the best community feel. That was kind of our consensus over the last 9 months working on this thing.
Okay.
So we have this rec area, the setbacks, and I think the extended depth of the lots. So you're not looking out the back and seeing someone else 20 feet away. This is going to be 142. 142 is our smallest depth, I think, on this. What I don't know is how to commit to that geometry in this form of a rezone, and that's why we started off PUD in the first place.
It would not be a part of the ordinance. We don't do contract zoning, so the board would have to either approve the zoning as what's requested, approve a different zoning, recommend denial. That would be the choices for the board.
Yeah.
Ms. Pierre, are you saying that we couldn't limit it to, if he's agreeing to have lots that are 70 feet wide, we can't put that in the ordinance, that
No,
these
ma'am.
have to be a minimum of that?
In one case, you'll have to leave off at staff's knowledge of the impervious and open space requirements that governs us. If we just sat down and maximized 60-foot lots, we would stop at 91, just a few less than 10 more units, which we have no intention to do. There's no way to commit to that in this forum for just the rezone, but that's the direction behind the scenes we've been going with staff with, drafting site plans and so forth.
Ms. Pierre, at what point would that come before this board to where we could put those types of limitations?
You can, well, after the transmittal, after it is transmitted, if the city council decides to transmit it, the applicant has submitted his preliminary subdivision plan, and the preliminary subdivision plan will come before this board, and it also goes before city council. So you'll have the opportunity to look at the lot sizes at that point, and you can make a recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Is there any other discussion? At the moment, we have before us a motion to approve Ordinance 1565, the zoning map amendment, as presented. Seeing no other discussion, we'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
1. Opposed?
Aye.
Nay? So it fails 3-1. We need another motion before the board. It can be a motion to deny, or it can be a motion to approve.
Madam Chair, if the board desires to make a recommendation to deny, I would recommend that you all put in there the reasons why you're recommending denial.
Thank you. Mr. Cobb, you look like you're just itching to give us some advice.
Actually, I just want to help. That's what
Okay.
I'd like to do. Okay. You've made a recommendation to approve a land use designation of low-density residential. So what you've stated is that the maximum density that you wish to allow on the property is 3.5 dwelling units per acre, and your staff has told you it's 91. Now, there's a range of zoning districts that are allowed within that low-density residential. There were a couple of notes. Let me just grab your notes. So I want to try to help. I want to get you to a recommendation. What that is, that's your own choice, but I want to get you to a recommendation because that's the main thing that we want to try to do tonight. Ms. Pierre's right. If you wish to recommend denial, then you will need to give the reasons for that. The difficulty in recommending denials that you've already made a recommendation for low-density residential. Okay, so my advice would be make a recommendation for a zoning district that is compatible or consistent with your low-density residential, already recommended low-density residential. Now we've got a number. R1B is one of them. It's probably the most dense one there is, but it's one of them. The R1, which I believe are 80-foot wide lots. That's another one. R1A, R1AA. They're all. One of the things about it is, one of the good things is that they've requested the most intensive zoning, or the densest zoning. You can recommend something less. The one thing that I would recommend not doing is recommend something more, because when you go past R1B, you're going into what's known as medium-density residential. And so that would be something that I wouldn't recommend that you do. Just a couple of things I wanted to bring forward. Mr. Pollack, you asked about the lots on Allendale. Why is it zoned R1A, but then we got MDR? The only thing that I could tell you is it's a very old subdivision. And more than likely what's happened is that when they did the comprehensive plan in the beginning, because it's never been changed, in the beginning it was the MDR reflected what the lots were. Because like I said, it's a very old subdivision. When they did the zoning, I can't explain that other than they tried to be consistent. And they created, those who came before us, created what we call a non-conforming situation. It's legally non-conforming, is what it is. If someone were to come in and tear out all the houses and rebuild, they would have to change the zoning district because it would have to match the medium-density residential, which would probably be the R2, which is to the south. Gentleman in the audience made a comment about the lots in there. Actually, everybody's right. One of the nice things about having technology, go ahead and look things up. Lots are platted at 50 feet. They're sold at 75. In other words, the houses are 1.5 lots. So everybody's right. I just wanted to let you know about that. So getting back to what our issue at hand, when you're talking about zoning, yes, and we struggled at DRC with this. Mr. Abel, we had a long discussion with Mr. Abel about the zoning because Ms. Pierre is correct. When you recommend the zoning, you're recommending the lot sizes, the lot widths, the setback requirements, and the permissible uses. Now, the fortunate thing about it is all the zonings around it all have the same permissible uses, so that's a wash. There aren't any questionable special exception uses or anything like that. They're all pretty much the same. So now what are we talking about? We're getting back down to lot size again. We're getting down to lot width and setbacks and all those things, and what do we see as compatible? And at DRC we struggled with that, but we started looking at it. If you look at the map and it says R1A, 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 and you got R1B in the middle. It doesn't make sense, but then when you start to look at the lot structure and you start to look at creating the diversity of housing, you start to see a transition occurring as you move north. From the south side and moving north, the lots are getting larger. And as you move out, the lots are getting larger. And so it starts to make a little bit of sense, but then there's also risk. What happens if they leave? And we've recommended R1B, which is 60-foot wide lots. But it's still bigger than what's in the south, but is it compatible with what's on the east and west? And obviously in the north, you're unincorporated, and they want it that way. So my recommendation to you is this, and the staff can help you with it because they've got all the information over there. You've got some choices: R1B, R1, R1A, R1AA. You could probably go R1 AAA, but I would recommend not, just because that's getting too less. The lots are getting too big, and you're not going to get. You're getting closer to. You may go past that one dwelling unit per acre minimum. But R1 AA and Deborah can give you the information as far as lot sizes, setbacks, all those things that you need to know. But you've got choices that you can recommend. The difficulty of it all is that what they're proposing is in between. And so they chose a path of it's better to comply. In other words, if I have a lot that's 60 feet wide, 6,000 square feet minimum lot size, and my developer has a lot width of 70 by 140, not only has it met the lot width, but it exceeds the lot area. And they're able to meet the setback requirements. So they chose a pathway of compliance rather than coming before you later with a preliminary subdivision plan asking for a lot of deviations. Because if they're R1, they would be asking for a lot less width. They would probably meet the area. They're probably asking for some relief on setbacks as well. So that's what I learned at DRC. Hopefully that'll help. But just wanted to give you that, so that give you what your options are. And if you have questions about the individual zoning districts, that's what we're talking about, zoning districts. And how does that relate to your future land use? Staff has all the information over there. If you have a question about a particular zoning district, obviously I would say ask them those questions. If you have other questions of the applicant, I would say ask them as well.
Thank you, Mr. Cobb.
Sure.
Any questions of Mr. Cobb before he gets back to his seat?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Pierre.
I must add, we were looking through the Land Development Code with the preliminary subdivision plans, and the preliminary subdivision plans now go to DRC and then to City Council. It does not come before this board. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Pollak?
can I make a motion
Yes.
to change the to make the motion for R1 land use designation instead of R1B.
And you said R1?
Yeah. The setbacks are pretty much the same. It's just the minimum lot width is a little bit more.
Okay, do we have a second? Mr. Lopez, thank you. Is there any discussion on this?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Mr.
They're going
Gillis?
to be coming to us with deviations for every single lot.
They won't be coming to this board.
Madam
Go to
Chair, if
council.
they do have to come, if they do have deviations and it is over 30%, they will be coming to you in the form of a development agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, just doesn't make sense.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the vote on recommending approval with an R1 designation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
3-1, motion passes.
It was 4-1, I believe.
I'm sorry, 4-1, you're correct. 4-1 on this motion and the last one. I'm having difficulty counting tonight. Okay, Both these items, 1564 and 1565 ordinances, will be considered by the City Council at their meeting on May 6, 2013, 6:30 in these chambers. Good luck to you. We have no discussion items. Our future meeting dates are April 23rd, May 14th, and May 28th. Ms. Pierre, do we know at this point if we're having meetings on each of those nights?
Patty, do you have it on your calendar? I know we're having a meeting next month, another work session, and that's going to be Teresa Carrera. She's going to do another work session on form-based codes. It's going to be on the architectural standards, and that is the first meeting of next month. The second meeting of next month of May, you will not have a meeting.
May 28th?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, we'll need to adjourn our regular meeting, and then we will take a break and then reopen, and then open our work session. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
So-
All those in favor say aye. Aye. We stand adjourned.
Okay, Kathy, we're ready.
Okay. We'll call the meeting to order. This is now our work session. We'll, all of the members of the board that were here earlier are still here. We're missing Mr. Sheridan and Mr. Wright. And I assume that I'm turning this over to Teresa?
I'm going to
Deborah?
introduce her.
I'm
I'm going to introduce Teresa.
Okay, then we'll turn it over to you, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you. Back in 2010, if you'll remember, most of you were on that board in 2010, the same board. We adopted the city's comprehensive plan, and we took it from the planning horizon of 2010 to 2025. And in the comprehensive plan, what we did was we had to amend our comprehensive plan to comply with Florida statutes, some of the regulations that came out in Florida statutes. We had to update our comprehensive plan to show. We also, as a result of some of City Council's discussion, some of your discussion, we shifted our comprehensive plan to go from a suburban community to more of an urban community, and which allows for more density. Because we changed our comprehensive plan, the Florida statutes require that we amend our land development code so that our land development code is consistent with our comprehensive plan. And Teresa is here. We hired Teresa so that she can amend or rewrite our land development code so that it one, complies with our comprehensive plan, and also takes us from that suburban pattern of development to more of an urban pattern of development. And Teresa is going to take you through what we are considering with our new land development code, which is a form-based code. And Teresa will go into details about that. So I will let Teresa get started with it.
Thank you, Deborah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, my name is Teresa Correa. I'm an architect and planner, and I joined the city last year to help rewrite the land development code. When I joined last year and I heard that the City Council was considering adopting form-based code as one of the elements of the land development code, I was very excited because form-based code is a new code that has a new philosophy. So it's a good moment to be working at the city and working with planning at the city. This is supposed to be an informal presentation, and really I'll give you a brief overview of what form-based code and how it differs from a traditional zoning. So please feel free to interrupt me with questions or comments along the presentation. We are planning to have 3 work sessions with you and with City Council, and we thought that because form-based code is a new code, it would be a good moment, a good subject to start with.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt? Can you hear very well?
You cannot hear? Okay, it has to be closer. So let's start. Can you hear now? I should hold it, maybe.
Is that better?
Yeah, I can hear.
I'm
Okay.
sorry?
I can hear.
Okay.
Can you? Okay.
No.
Okay. The basic idea behind form-based code is that design is more important than use. And form-based code, and with that, it's already a big philosophical shift from the traditional zoning. Form-based code was born because some planners, while studying great cities, what made great cities special, they discovered it was not how those cities would separate uses, which made them a special place. It was the built environment, was the urban form that they would produce that made them attractive to visiting, to living and staying there. So they decided to focus on form instead of use. And to see what they are trying to oppose to, traditional zoning usually works with two standards, uses and densities. And we just saw a discussion about that. We can see that there are positive aspects and negative aspects as to traditional zoning. Nowadays, we attribute more negatives than positives. Uses are segregated, and the idea was really to protect residential uses. And that's exactly what you were trying to do that tonight here, talking about, how to protect neighborhoods around the new development. All the standards are to promote that, to increase ventilation, access to air, to light, and to control density. This was considered an appropriate government policy to deal with the beginning, in industrial cities, in how they were initially created, where you would have a lot of pollution, a lot of nuisance attributed to a more intense use. With time, planners and cities started to see the effects of the traditional zoning, and so the negatives started to be more clear. One negative is that it tends to foster sprawl, and that's easy to understand because while separating uses, you create longer distances. When you have a whole district which is just residential that is distant from another district that is commercial, industrial, you're increasing distances. You also exclude certain groups in certain uses. The nature of traditional zoning is basically exclusionary. When you create a whole district or a whole zoning that has an R1 category, that has lots with certain width and size and setbacks, you're saying that only those who can afford that specific lot can live there. So you separate certain groups. And even if commercial, even an upscale commercial could not stay there because it's not allowed. It tends to be inflexible over great periods of time because it's more strict. It also, because it's tax-based and you are trying to translate something that is spatial into tax, into words, it tends to produce what we know to be our land development codes, those thick, and very heavy and difficult to read and digest documents. It does not create vibrant communities because it does not accept mixed use. And it stimulates monotony and suppresses diversity. And not necessarily produce good design because design is not really the focus of a traditional zoning. So planners and cities came up with alternatives to traditional zoning. You have bonus and incentive zoning, where it's a mechanism where cities would grant a bonus, usually in terms of density, in exchange to some increase in standards or amenities, like increase in open space or enhanced landscape, that sort of thing. You would have inclusionary zoning, where you would have developments where you have developments that...
There you go.
Yeah, I can see the difference. Where you have developments in which the city would come and say, would require a specific share of the development to be targeting specific income levels of the population. You would have transfer of development rights. Also, would be an alternative mechanism in which you could transfer development rights from parcels that you want to protect, either because it has historic value or it's an area that you want to preserve the natural aspect of it, and then you would transfer that density, that development right to another parcel in which could absorb that additional bonus in intensity or density. Then you have our PUDs, and we are familiar with that. And PUDs would bring flexibility because they are negotiated standards between city and developers to a specific development. While they bring flexibility, they also have some negative aspects because they tend to freeze those conditions over a period of time. But, for instance, in the city of Ovidio right now, if we have a developer who wants to come and build townhomes, the only way to allow that would be through a development agreement and a PUD. You would have cluster zoning where the city would stipulate the standards to a larger area and would give the developer the flexibility to apply those standards to specific parcels. But they could not exceed the maximum that was attributed to that area, but it would give the developer some flexibility in design. Then you would have performance zoning, where instead of specifically determining standards like uses or sizes, you would give policy, general guidelines that the development would have to meet. So instead of saying, listing the uses permissible, the policy would be to allow compatible uses. So you would have, and then the reviewers would judge if that development is meeting the policies that were established. And then we have form-based code, which is the newest version of alternatives to traditional zoning. Form-based codes has as an organizing principle the physical form instead of the use. And what happens that you come up with a vision, and this vision is usually shared with the community, and then it's translated into a physical plan. So you imagine what kind of city do you want, and then you codify, from that physical plan that you establish, what are the standards that would allow developers to reach that physical plan that you established. It is linked to the idea of new urbanism and smart growth, and what they promote is a more compact, a more urban, a pedestrian-friendly environment, an environment that has that promotes mixed use. So these are the ideas that are connected to new urbanism and smart growth. It also promotes the idea of distinctive places. So we want to create areas that have character. It places a great emphasis on public spaces, on thoroughfares, on streetscape. That's the kind of thing that form-based codes are focusing. And because it's design-oriented, the code is displayed in a different way. It's more graphically. It uses a lot of pictures, and so it conveys the message in a different way. And it's based on transacts. There is the model of transact, which classifies the city into different regions, and these regions show a gradient in terms of intensity of use. And I'll show what it looks like. So the key differences between traditional zoning and form-based code is that one is use-based, the other one is form-based. One identifies the city as in terms of districts, so divides the city in terms of huge districts, and these districts have the same characteristics, while form-based code thinks the city in terms of neighborhoods and streets. Traditional zoning puts more emphasis on individual uses and parcel, at the parcel level. Form-based code places emphasis on the block and the building, the relationship between the building and the public space. One segregates uses, the other one combines uses. One promotes uniformity in neighborhoods, the other wants to promote diversity in neighborhoods. One has a limited ability to affect change because it's more strict as to uses. The other one has a stronger ability to change, to accept change. One has limited design standards because it's not really based on design. The other one is focusing on design and architecture. Even the standards that they use are different. So traditional zoning uses setbacks, and setbacks are given in our land development code as a minimum standard. So if you have a setback of 10, houses can be placed at 10, 15, anything above that. So you don't create an alignment of buildings. Form-based code brings the idea of build to line, which is the same idea of a setback, but establishes where the building should be placed. And it can be a zero setback, so the building would be aligned at the property line, but it tends to create a more an idea of group, because it wants to create that alignment that would then give a good relationship with the street. The way they think about the street is it as if it would be a public room in which the frontage of the buildings would be the walls. So the emphasis go from the parcel to the public space. So one is focused on site and the other one is focusing on the street. This is just an animation to show how the setbacks and the build-to line differ. So one, you have the setbacks, and on the upper picture you would see how a city would look like, and this could be anywhere where you have houses and structures and buildings placed in different setbacks, and then the idea of aligning them, and then at the end the idea of really giving some thought to architecture and giving even a step further, creating the elements that make a street a desirable place to be. The streets, the trees, the comfortable sidewalks, that kind of thing. So that would be the urban form that they both create. Traditional zoning does not really establish what kind of form those standards will create, while the form-based code details the kind of street we want to have. So the code gives a hierarchy of streets and what kind of frontage that street would have with the buildings, that sort of thing. So it's a different philosophy. This is the transacts, and this is just a model from literature. They usually show 6 different regions and 1 special district, and every city would customize it according to their own conditions. This would be the transacts applied, and this is just from literature. So these are examples of cities in the United States. And then you have transacts applied to the city of Oviedo, how it would look like. We would not have T6 which is urban core zone, which will be a more intense downtown area, or even the special district, which would be even more intense. Form-based code components would be also somewhat different. It is a regulatory plan, so it's not supposed to be used as mere guidelines to the city, and you would have building envelope standards, frontage types, thoroughfare types, which would describe different streets and building types. It's much more design-oriented, as we can see here. And I'll show an example of how form-based code looks like. Literature also, and cities who have already adopted form-based code indicate 4 criteria for success. One is that standards should be clear and concise, because that's what the market wants. Market wants to have clarity and consistency to be able to predict how development will occur. The fact that it's design-oriented doesn't mean that we have to adopt an architectural style, so it should be style-neutral. The code should be more easier to read, because it uses more graphics and photos. And also the process should be streamlined, the approval process. And what the form-based code wants to also to achieve is to decrease the number of deviations and variances that in the traditional zoning, that's a common pattern. So we start by documenting the city. So because form-based codes should be related to the real environment that cities have. So, and this is just an effort to start documenting what we have in the city. We already have examples of a more urban and more compact development in the city, which is the bottom row here. Then the same thing to commercial areas. And as to urban setting, we have some examples, and then we have a drawing from Ovidio the Park, which we hope it will bring that kind of setting to the city. The same thing for the office and industrial and rural areas. Also, making sure that we take into account our landmarks, how to make them even more valuable in the city. And form-based code has been used for new development, but it's really also perfect for redevelopment and infill. And these are 2 examples that I wanted to bring here. One is also anywhere in the States, but it's a suburban corridor, and how then that particular city projected this vision of a more urban corridor, and then from that vision the code would extrapolate the standards. And then in the bottom, it's an interesting example, because the urban form did not change. You have the same type of building, but it was the fact that you brought more uses, so we have a mixed use, and all the role that streetscape has into the feel of a street that changes completely with the trees and with the sidewalks and with the crosswalk that would make this place much more vibrant. This is how a form-based code looks like. It's much more graphic in nature. You have all the streets would have that cross-section. This is just an example. And form-based code could be applied in different ways. You could try to adjust your existing land development code to incorporate some of the elements. But this is very difficult, and some cities have tried that, but it's difficult to achieve, because since they come from different places, they have different philosophical, bases. It's really hard to adjust a traditional zoning into a form-based code. Few cities have really replaced a land development code completely. so transformed completely into a form-based code. And the only city I know of is the city of Miami. And most cities have been adopting it partially, either to new development areas or areas they want to revitalize, they want to redevelop. And that's the approach we are trying to pursue here. So for our situation here, we are considering, and this is just for consideration because it has not been discussed yet, but we are trying to see that it would be a good choice to follow the corridors and the gateways and some important intersections. So the old downtown would be a good area for redevelopment. This intersection with Mitchell Hammock and Central Avenue being now so close to the new downtown, also a good area for redevelopment. And so we are still choosing areas in the city and studying how to, what would be the best approach for Oviedo. And I just want to go, and I'll try to go quickly through the images here of Baldwin Park. Baldwin Park is an example, and it's close by, and it's because it's well developed now. I thought it was a good opportunity to show how a form-based code looks like at the street level. And Baldwin Park has a variety of housing types. They are all more compact. The houses, the buildings are closer to the street, but the landscape is beautiful. The streets are very comfortable to walk to. All garages are placed at the rear of the property, so you don't have, you're not disputing, the sidewalks with cars. And you have different, the previous one was a townhome for rental. This one is a townhome for sale. Another type of townhome, and you have a view of the street, and all streets in Baldwin Park have that kind of treatment. A street would have different types of houses. This is an apartment. The ground floor is a one-bedroom. The second floor is a loft with 3 bedrooms. This is a unit that is called live-and-work unit. So the ground floor, this building actually has 2 units. So the ground floor would be an office or a retail, and the upper floor would be residential. You also have large single-family homes. Actually, you have single-family homes in different sizes and prices. These are houses that are sold for $1 million and $1.2, whatever, expensive houses. Here you have a little bit of the variety that Baldwin Park has as to single-family. And the interesting about Baldwin Park is that you have those large houses very close to rental apartment. Nothing in Baldwin Park is gated. Everything is open. You don't have cul-de-sacs. Everything is connected. All the garages are in the rear of the properties, and that's for townhomes, for single-family offices. Another view, these are for single-family houses, so you have the alleys connecting, and these are service alleys. Everything's connected by sidewalks, so it's a place that you can walk freely. All the lakes, and that was a vision that the citizens determined, that the lakes should be public. So around the lakes you have parks, and so you have the parks create destinations for people. This is a village center where you have more intense use. You have retail and also residential on the top. This is also an office. This is another interesting concept that Baldwin Park has 3 examples, and this is a kind of a new version of a cul-de-sac. It's considered like a pocket development that Jenna was talking about. So this is a common green area. You have in this particular area 14 houses around this common area. The street has one way, all the garages in the back. The houses are smaller, and they are closer to each other. But you were trading front yard for a common area. So that's the idea. Again, offices, and this building on the top right is the SunTrust building, has offices for rental. And they have like they call executive offices. You can rent a cubicle with a desk and shelves, and you would have services. Then you would share services like a meeting room, the copying and printing, that sort of thing, and the receptionist. And I'll end with this picture that looks like those cross sections that we saw. All the streets in Baldwin Park would have that kind of treatment. And the idea is that because everything is connected, you can walk, to different places. Because so from point A to point B, you have different routes. So you don't have to go through the same avenue over and over, because that's the only way to go. When you have a situation where you have developments creating cul-de-sacs, you create only one, route. When you have a grid that with multiple routes, you don't, put pressure on one specific road. Because everything is, you have public lakes, and you have retail and offices. You have destinations to go to. And because the environment is nice, you can walk. So that's the idea. The idea here is to show that density in itself, it's not a problem. It's how you create, how you build, around using that density. That's how you create a nice environment or not as nice environment. So the implications for Oviedo, if the city wants to and that's a consideration for you and for City Council, if the city wants to adopt a form-based code and all the philosophy that is behind it, we would promote connectivity, and we would improve walkability, and we would have to deal with issues like having public streets being blocked by gates, for instance, or having to approve or not, or to accept or not, gated communities, which is another issue, or having sidewalks that don't link to anywhere, as we have in those neighborhoods here, or sidewalks that don't have shade because trees are missing, that sort of thing. And again, if we want to adopt form-based code, we would have to incentivize mixed use. So the question, I'll open now for questions and comments, and the question that I have here is, do you think the city is ready for that? So that's the end of the presentation. And
Thank you, Teresa. Other questions? All that and you got nothing?
Ready for it.
What kind of timetable are we looking at it?
for the Land Development Code review, well, we have been updating the timeline, right, the schedule, but the latest one that we have is to end next year around, I would say, May. I don't have it right here, but that's the...
So you're talking a year from now?
Yes.
Are we trying to apply, kind of impose that criteria a little bit on the new downtown?
Sorry?
Are we trying to impose a little bit of that on the new downtown for the most part? Yeah.
Well, I think we will review the new downtown standards the new downtown already is approaching
I
that
think
kind of,
some of the things that-
is already there, but we will try to adjust some things, especially the maximum, because we have minimum standards, minimum setbacks, but we don't have maximum setbacks. Maybe we'll have to revise parking, because that's another issue, but yeah, I think so.
Mr. Lopez, I think the biggest thing is that Oviedo on the Park, it is an attempt at form-based. When it was originally written in the code, it was based on an area that wasn't form-based code. One of the neat things about this is that we can take an area within the city and we can create a look for it through this form-based code. And we can do that in different spots throughout the city and to make them unique, sort of like Oviedo on the Park, make those areas unique through what Teresa was talking about as far as seeing the concept and then writing the code to meet that concept. And that's really a lot what we did with Oviedo on the Park.
Well, if you take any of the major cities around the country, or any popular cities around the country, or even in Europe, that's what they've been doing years. Exactly. This is not a new concept. I mean,
Exactly.
Maybe it's a new terminology, perhaps, but conceptually, it's not new.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right, especially in Europe. I mean, that's what,
If you travel to Europe, this
is
it's
exactly
there
it.
all the time.
And one of the things, too, and I guess one of the things that I know, at least for myself, the reason that I wanted to move in this direction is cities evolve. And when you think about our city, and you look at the history of our city, our evolution, we've grown from a little hamlet back in 1980. We had about 2,000 or 3,000 people, if that many. And then along comes Alafaya Woods. And that started it all. You know, UCF, Alafaya Woods, everything just sort of started it. And so that this evolution of going from this agricultural hamlet and then growing to a pretty successful suburban community, going to the next step of becoming an urbanized city, and when you say urbanized city, that doesn't mean we have to be Orlando or New York, or we can be urbanized and be a city and still be different and be our own self. And so taking us to that next evolution, we need to get away from the code that we have that still promotes that suburban design. And our code is great for things that are new. But when we have something that is not new and we have to go in and redo it, our code is hard. It's just very hard.
It's not flexible.
No.
That's the problem.
And so going to something like this is going to give us the opportunity to really work with people, because where we're getting at is we're going to get to a point, and I don't know when, but we're going to get to a point where the cost of doing new is going to be the same as tearing down and redoing. And that's really where we need to be ready. And what Teresa's proposing is going to get us there, at least what I believe. I believe it'll get us there.
We don't have a lot of land unless we start annexing, so this makes sense.
Right.
So in the areas where, you're proposing this in certain areas of the city?
Yes, yeah.
In the areas where it's not proposed, if somebody wanted to do this type of development, what would you do?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And we were thinking, but we haven't really reached a conclusion yet, to have it as an optional layer too. So that if you could have, I mean, the fact that we are also going to revise the land development code, we will try to incorporate many of the, the good elements that we can incorporate into, the rest of the city. So we will
restrict it at all. I mean, I would do it citywide. I mean, I wouldn't put any restrictions at all, whether it be residential or mixed or whatever.
I think there is something good about applying it incrementally, because you learn also, in the process, because it has to be customized to a video, right? I mean, we have, so you learn when you apply new code, and because it has a different philosophy. I mean, I think it's good to have kind of start in the more intense areas, but also we will have to modernize, the land development code, in many aspects. So we'll try to also give, and maybe have it as an overlay, an optional overlay for those who,
I think that's
I have
something
to-
y'all just learned. You need to make a note about that. How do we adapt it? How do we adapt it? I always think of Bentley Woods. How do we adapt it to Bentley Woods?
Because you got sections, the old part of Oviedo.
Exactly.
That sooner or later is going to be redeveloped. So do you put that in there, or you don't make it, or you make it optional, or are you just looking at the major intersections? I think you've got to look at a broader scope. I think that's where you were going with that. Because if you don't include that in there, it kind of defeats the purpose almost.
There's a map in our comprehensive plan, a map of corridors that we have. And these are special corridors, gateways that we call them, in our comprehensive plan. That's one of the areas that those areas there it is. That's one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Those are some of the areas that we were looking at starting with. And if you'll notice, a lot of the areas that are left out are the neighborhoods that are already built out. But yeah, there may be a day.
I mean, there's going to be time when
Right.
those areas, and all due respect to those citizens of Oviedo that live in those sections, and I'm not discouraging it, but those homes, people are going to, let's take parts of Winter Park. A lot of those homes were started to, older homes are being sold and redeveloped.
Yeah,
Why
it
not
will
give
happen,
them that
yeah.
option?
Yeah.
And why not do the same thing in those areas of Oviedo? That's my take on it. Maybe I'm kind of thinking too far ahead. I don't.
No, that's exactly what we're doing now. I mean, we did a little bit of this with the comprehensive plan rewrite. We did a little bit of it, and we started looking at, okay, what are we going to be like in 2025? And so now we're writing the code to get us to 2025. So no, Mr. Lopez, it's okay to think out like that. It really is.
Because I think if we don't, we're selling ourselves short for the future.
But you'll have pushback. I mean,
Of course.
There's no question.
This group that just came to us tonight, what if they bought that agricultural space and said, we'd like to put a little store in there, a little wine bar, a couple homes, some townhomes. Think of the pushback you're going to have in plopping something like that in the middle of the residential. So there is going to be pushback depending on how we roll it out.
I think
it's
that's
how you present it. It's definitely on how you present it, because I'm in favor of that type of growth. Because I've traveled to Europe. I mean, I grew up in Miami, so I've seen that.
But you have people in this community who came here because it's a suburban community. They came here for chickens. They came
Yeah, and I
here-
think the idea here is not really to change the suburban area.
Slowly, I think they will.
I think
when
the
you see
change
it's
is
a pretty
coming.
area and it works and it's okay, but I don't think you can.
And I tell you why I think they're ready for a change, because I think.
But the idea is to increase
options.
options to those who want some more urban. So we want to preserve, the suburb as it is for now, because that's what people bought, and that's what they want. But
And you want to do a mixed use?
we want to.
I'm sorry, you guys, we got to talk one at a time here.
No, I was just saying that we don't want to stop, or change the suburban part of Oviedo, because it's huge. I think it's strong still, and I think it will change with time. And I have demographic, trends here that show that it will change. I have a figure here that shows that in 2025, 75 to 85% of households in the United States will not have children. So, I mean, that's it.
Not have what?
Will not have children. So, I mean, it's going to be, this is a huge demographic change. So the suburbs, will have to adapt to this new change. But what we want to do here is really to provide options for those who would like to have a more urban, environment. Either seniors who would like to have, to walk to a grocery, or a new professional that lives alone, that wants to live in a condo or in an apartment, and may walk to the park and have, fun, in the weekend. So that's the kind of thing that I think what we are proposing. That's why we are concentrating in areas that already have a kind of, they are prone for redevelopment, or they are prone for a more intense use.
Are there any other questions or comments? Do you have anything else, Teresa?
No.
Deborah, do you? Mr. Cobb?
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can we get a copy of that?
I can, yeah, I can send you a copy.
Can we?
To change the name of the committee? Board?
Yeah, we have to.
Oh, for zoning?
They wouldn't need us, actually.
And by the way, if you have any input for our
They wouldn't need
land
us.
development code rewrite, we are in the process of accepting, suggestions, so that would be
Actually,
good.
Ms. Hughes, if that's something that you all would like to do, this is the time to do it with the Land Development Code, because the Land Development Code is what establishes this board. We did Planning, Zoning, and Appeals because we were combining the Land Planning Agency and the Board of Adjustment into one board. But if you guys want to recommend something else, we're open.
I didn't know that, 'cause I was just saying, I didn't even know if the PCA would even have a role.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, you have a role. It's all got to come through you. So, yeah, you'll have a role.
Okay, if there's nothing else, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I thought this wasn't
I'm sorry, Mr.
I
Gillis?
thought this wasn't informal.
It's a work session, yes.
It's a work session, so you still have to adjourn?
Okay, Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?